The silk felt wrong against Elena Rosewood's skin. She stood before the three-way mirror in the bridal suite of the Grand Monarch Hotel, her fingers trembling as they traced the deceptively simple lines of her wedding dress. To anyone else, it looked like something pulled from a discount rack. Plain ivory fabric, minimal embellishment, clean lines that whispered rather than shouted. But Elena knew better. She knew what this dress really was, and the secret made her stomach churn with a mixture of terror and exhilaration. "Oh, honey, no." Her sister Vivian's voice cut through the morning light streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows. "Please tell me you have something else to wear." Elena's mother, Patricia Rosewood, emerged from the bathroom with a champagne flute in one hand, and disappointment etched across her Botoxed features. "Darling, I know we discussed budget constraints, but this is your wedding day. Surely Marcus could have afforded something more substantial?" The dress rustled as Elena turned to face her family. Vivian lounged on the velvet chaise, her own designer gown for the ceremony costing more than most people's cars. Their cousin Madison sat cross-legged on the bed, her phone already out, probably ready to document what she clearly considered a fashion disaster for her social media followers. "It's perfect for me," Elena said quietly, her voice steady despite the chaos building in her chest. "Perfect?" Vivian laughed, the sound sharp and brittle. "Elena, sweetheart, you're marrying into one of the most prominent families in the city. The Blackstone name means something. People will be watching, judging. This dress makes you look like you're going to a courthouse wedding, not the social event of the season." Elena's phone buzzed on the vanity. A text from an unknown number. "The package has been delivered. Remember, trust no one today. They're closer than you think. Jay." Her blood turned to ice water. She deleted the message immediately, her fingers moving with practiced speed that came from 3 months of covert communication. 3 months since she'd stumbled into something that should have remained buried. 3 months since her world had become a carefully constructed lie built around this single day. "I need some air," Elena announced, moving toward the balcony doors. "You can't go out there?" Madison shrieked. "What if someone sees you? It's bad luck." "I think we're past worrying about luck," Patricia muttered, examining Elena's dress with the expression of someone who discovered mold in expensive cheese. Elena stepped onto the balcony anyway, the October morning crisp against her skin. 23 floors below, Central Park stretched out in autumn glory, the trees already surrendering their leaves to the inevitable march toward winter. In 3 hours, she would walk down the aisle of St. Matthew's Cathedral to marry Marcus Blackstone, heir to a shipping empire and the most eligible bachelor in their social circle. What her family didn't know, what no one knew, was that this wedding was both the most important day of her life and potentially the last day she would be alive. The dress fluttered around her legs as another gust of wind swept across the balcony. Hidden within its seemingly simple construction were details that would make the fashion world weep. Hand-sewn pearls from the South Pacific, silk threads that had taken artisans 6 months to create, and embroidery so intricate it could only be seen under specific lighting conditions. The dress was a masterpiece disguised as mediocrity, just like Elena herself. "Elena!" Vivian's voice carried a note of panic now. "Get back in here! Your makeup artist is here, and we need to do something about your hair. And seriously, we need to discuss finding you a different dress. I can call Bergdorf's. They might have something." "No." Elena stepped back inside, closing the balcony doors with more force than necessary. "This is the dress I'm wearing." The makeup artist, a tiny woman named Celia, with purple hair and kind eyes, set up her kit on the vanity. "You look beautiful, honey," she said softly, her voice carrying a slight accent Elena couldn't place. "Sometimes the most elegant choice is the simplest one." Patricia snorted. "Elegant? It looks like she bought it off the rack at Target." If only they knew, Elena thought, settling into the chair as Celia began working. If only they knew that this Target dress had been handcrafted by one of the most secretive designers in the world, a man whose work was coveted by royalty, and whose pieces sold for millions at private auctions. If only they knew that wearing this dress made her a target for people who would kill to possess it. If only they knew that the man who created it had been murdered 2 weeks ago, and that she was the only person who knew where his final, most revolutionary creation was hidden. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was Marcus. "Can't wait to see you walk down that aisle. You're going to be the most beautiful bride in the world. Love you, future Mrs. Blackstone." Elena's heart clenched. Marcus was good, kind, honest. Everything she didn't deserve. He had no idea what he was marrying into. No idea that his bride was carrying secrets that could destroy both their families. No idea that there were people who would stop at nothing to get what she was wearing. "Hold still, sweetheart," Celia murmured, applying foundation with expert strokes. "You're trembling." "Wedding nerves," Vivian said dismissively, finally putting down her phone. "Though if I were wearing that dress, I'd be nervous too." "Elena, seriously, last chance. I can have something delivered from my boutique. Designer gown, something worthy of the Blackstone name." "The dress stays," Elena said firmly, meeting her sister's eyes in the mirror. "It's more special than you could possibly imagine." Vivian threw up her hands in defeat. "Fine. But don't blame me when the society pages roast you alive." If Elena survived the day, society page criticism would be the least of her worries. As Celia worked, Elena's mind drifted back to the beginning, 3 months ago, when she'd been just another young woman planning her dream wedding, worried about flowers and centerpieces, and whether her grandmother's vintage pearls would complement her dress. Before she'd met Jonathan Ashworth in that coffee shop near the Met, before he'd looked at her with those intense gray eyes and changed everything. "You have excellent taste," he'd said, noticing her vintage Chanel bag. "Most people can't tell the difference between authentic craftsmanship and clever imitation." She'd been flattered by the attention from the distinguished older man, had even felt a little thrill when he'd introduced himself as a fashion designer. Not just any designer. Jonathan Ashworth, whose name was whispered reverently in fashion circles, whose pieces were so exclusive that wearing one was like carrying a Picasso. "I'm working on something special," he'd said that day, his voice dropping to a whisper, "something that will revolutionize the industry. But I need the right person to showcase it, someone who understands that true beauty lies in simplicity." The memory of his excitement made Elena's chest tight. Jonathan had been so alive that day, so passionate about his work. And now he was dead, victim of what the police were calling a robbery gone wrong. But Elena knew better. She knew because of the package that had arrived this morning, the one that contained evidence of what Jonathan had really been working on, and why someone had been willing to kill for it. "There," Celia said, stepping back to admire her work. "Perfect." Elena looked at herself in the mirror and almost didn't recognize the woman staring back. Celia had enhanced her natural beauty without masking it, creating a look that was both timeless and modern. Her dark hair was styled in a simple updo that showed off the elegant line of her neck, and her makeup was flawless but understated. She looked like a woman ready to marry the love of her life. She also looked like a woman ready to die for what she believed in. "Much better," Patricia said grudgingly. "Though that dress is still a travesty." Madison finally looked up from her phone. "Wait, are you actually going to wear that thing? I mean, I know you've always been the weird sister, but this is next level." "Madison," Vivian warned, but Elena could see she agreed. Elena stood, smoothing the silk over her hips. The dress fit like it had been made for her, which, in a way, it had been. Jonathan had taken her measurements that day in his studio, his hands professional but gentle, as he'd marked where each seam should fall. "This piece will be my legacy," he'd whispered, his fingers tracing the design on his sketch pad. "It will change everything. But you must promise me, if anything happens to me, you must keep it safe. There are people who would kill to possess what I'm creating, and they cannot be allowed to have it." She'd thought he was being dramatic. Jonathan had always been eccentric, prone to grand statements and artistic temperament. She'd never imagined he was being literal. A knock at the door made everyone freeze. "That's probably the photographer," Vivian said, checking her phone. Right on time. But when Elena opened the door, it wasn't the photographer standing in the hallway. It was a man in an expensive suit, someone she'd never seen before, with cold blue eyes and a smile that didn't reach them. "Ms. Rosewood," he said, his voice smooth as honey. "I'm David Sterling, Insurance investigator. I wonder if I might have a word with you about your dress. The world tilted on its axis. Elena gripped the doorframe, fighting to keep her expression neutral. I'm sorry, I don't understand. This is my wedding day. I know, and I apologize for the timing. But I'm afraid there's been a significant development in the Jonathan Ashworth case. It seems there's some question about the provenance of certain pieces from his final collection. Behind her, Elena could hear her family's confused murmuring. They had no idea who Jonathan Ashworth was. No idea that their daughter and sister had been living a double life for months. I really can't discuss this now, Elena said, trying to close the door. Sterling's hand shot out, stopping it. The gesture was casual, but Elena caught the flash of something metallic under his jacket. I'm afraid it can't wait. You see, the dress you're wearing, it's not legally yours to possess. What do you think will happen next? Share your predictions in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more thrilling stories. Elena's heart hammered against her ribs as she stared at David Sterling. Behind her, she could hear Vivian's sharp intake of breath, could feel her mother's disapproval crystallizing into something sharper, suspicion. What exactly are you suggesting, Mr. Sterling? Elena forced her voice to remain steady, even as her mind raced through possible escape routes. The balcony was 23 floors up. The bathroom had no windows. The only way out was through this man, and something in his cold blue eyes told her he wasn't going to make it easy. I'm not suggesting anything, Ms. Rosewood. I'm stating a fact. Sterling stepped into the room uninvited, his gaze sweeping over the opulent bridal suite before settling back on Elena. That dress is part of Jonathan Ashworth's final collection, valued at approximately $1 million. It was reported stolen from his studio the night he died. The silence that followed was deafening. Elena could hear her own pulse thundering in her ears, could sense her family's shock rippling through the room like a physical force. $1 million? Patricia's voice came out as a strangled whisper. Elena, what is this man talking about? There's been a mistake, Elena said, not taking her eyes off Sterling. This dress isn't the ethereal prototype. Sterling continued smoothly, pulling out his phone and showing her a photograph. Hand-crafted silk with microscopic threading techniques that have never been replicated, embedded with rare pearls and precious metals invisible to the naked eye. The last piece Jonathan Ashworth completed before his unfortunate death. Elena stared at the photo on Sterling's phone. It was unmistakably her dress, but the image had been taken in Jonathan's studio. She remembered that day. The way the afternoon light had streamed through his workshop windows, the smell of silk and coffee in the air, the excitement in Jonathan's voice as he'd explained what made this dress so special. Oh my God, Madison breathed, her phone already out and recording. Elena, you're wearing $1 million dress to your wedding? How did you even? Madison, put that phone away, Vivian snapped. But her voice was sharp with confusion and a growing alarm. Elena, I don't understand. How do you know Jonathan Ashworth? Why would you have one of his dresses? Elena felt the walls closing in around her. She'd spent months preparing for this day, planning for every contingency she could imagine, but she'd never anticipated this. Sterling wasn't supposed to be here. No one was supposed to know about the dress until after the ceremony, after she'd had a chance to execute her plan. Ms. Rosewood, Sterling said, his voice taking on a more official tone, I'm going to need you to come with me. There are some questions about your relationship with the deceased, and about how you came to possess stolen property. Stolen? The word exploded from Patricia like a gunshot. Elena Marie Rosewood, what have you done? Nothing. Elena backed toward the bathroom, her mind racing. I didn't steal anything. Jonathan gave me this dress. He wanted me to have it. Do you have documentation proving that? Sterling asked, still blocking the door. A receipt? A gift letter? Anything that would legally transfer ownership? Elena's silence was enough. Jonathan had been secretive about everything, paranoid about leaving paper trails. All she had were memories of whispered conversations and urgent warnings about people who couldn't be trusted. I'm calling the police, Vivian announced, reaching for her phone. No! Elena's sharp voice stopped her sister mid-dial. Vivian, please. Let me explain. Explain what? Patricia's face had gone pale beneath her carefully applied makeup. Is my daughter a thief? That she's about to walk down the aisle in stolen goods worth more than our house? Sterling watched the family drama unfold with the detached interest of a scientist observing lab rats. Ms. Rosewood, this would be much easier if you simply cooperated. We can handle this quietly, professionally. No need to ruin your wedding day any more than necessary. Something in his tone made Elena's skin crawl. The offer sounded reasonable, but there was an undercurrent of threat that made every instinct scream danger. This wasn't a legitimate insurance investigator. She was certain of it now. Real investigators didn't show up at weddings unannounced. They didn't have that predatory stillness in their eyes. I need to see some identification, Elena said, stalling for time while her brain worked furiously. Official credentials. Sterling smiled, the expression cold and sharp as winter wind. Of course. He reached into his jacket, and Elena tensed, half expecting him to pull out a weapon. Instead, he produced a leather wallet, flipping it open to reveal an ID card and badge. Elena squinted at the credentials, trying to buy herself more time to think. The ID looked legitimate, but something felt wrong about the whole situation. If this dress was really stolen, if it was really worth $1 million, why would an insurance investigator come alone? Why wouldn't the police be involved? Your ID says you work for Meridian Assurance, Elena said slowly, but Jonathan never mentioned having insurance on his pieces. Many high-value items are insured without the creator's direct involvement, Sterling replied smoothly. Galleries, collectors, estates, they all have reasons to protect valuable art. Art? Vivian had been listening intently, her expression shifting from confusion to something sharper. Elena, you said you met this designer at a coffee shop. That sounds casual. How did you end up with $1 million prototype? Elena felt sweat gathering between her shoulder blades despite the October chill. Every question was leading her deeper into territory she couldn't navigate without revealing the truth, and the truth would endanger everyone in this room. It's complicated, she said weakly. Uncomplicated, Patricia demanded. Right now. Before Elena could respond, another knock echoed through the room. This time it was the photographer, a cheerful woman in her 50s with silver hair and kind eyes. Good morning, ladies. I'm Sarah Chen from Moment in Time Photography. I'm here for the pre-ceremony shots. Sarah's smile faltered as she took in the tense atmosphere. Is everything all right? You all look like someone died. The irony of the comment wasn't lost on Elena. Someone had died. Jonathan, 2 weeks ago in what the police claimed was a robbery. But Elena knew better. Jonathan had been killed for what he'd discovered, for what he'd been trying to expose. And now the same people who'd murdered him were closing in on her. We're dealing with a situation, Sterling said, his voice taking on an authoritative tone that made Sarah step back. I'm going to need you to wait outside while we resolve this matter. Actually, Elena said, a desperate idea forming, maybe we should all wait outside. Give me a chance to change clothes and figure this out. No one is leaving this room until we resolve the matter of the stolen dress, Sterling said firmly. Stolen dress? Sarah's eyebrows shot up. Oh my! Well, I've certainly never encountered this situation before. Elena caught Sarah's eye and saw something flicker there. A sharpness that hadn't been there moments before. The photographer was studying Sterling with professional attention, her gaze lingering on details that others might miss. Mr. Sterling, Sarah said slowly, might I ask which insurance company you represent again? Meridian Assurance, Sterling replied, but Elena noticed he seemed less comfortable under Sarah's scrutiny. Interesting, Sarah murmured, pulling out her own phone. Because I've photographed several high-end fashion events for Meridian, and I don't recall seeing you before. Their usual investigators are quite distinctive. Sterling's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. I'm new to the fashion division. Of course. Sarah's smile was pleasant, but Elena caught the edge beneath it. Would you mind if I called my contact at Meridian to verify? Just to protect my client, you understand. Insurance fraud is such a problem in the fashion industry. The room fell silent except for the distant sounds of traffic 23 floors below. Elena watched Sterling's face, saw the micro-expressions that revealed his growing discomfort. Whoever he wasn't prepared for this level of scrutiny. That won't be necessary, Sterling said finally. I have all the authority I need. I'm sure you do, Sarah replied, her fingers already moving across her phone screen. But I'm sure you understand my position. $1 million dress, a bride in distress, a wedding about to begin. I need to protect everyone involved. Elena held her breath as Sarah made her call. This could go either way. Sarah might actually reach someone at Meridian who would confirm Sterling's story, or she might expose him as a fraud. Either way, Elena was running out of time and options. Hello, this is Sarah Chen, the photographer said into her phone. I'm calling to verify the credentials of one of your investigators, David Sterling. Yes, I'll hold on. Sterling's hand moved almost imperceptibly toward his jacket. Elena caught the motion and felt ice water flood her veins. Whatever was about to happen, it was going to happen fast. Interesting, Sarah said, ending her call. Meridian Assurance has never heard of David Sterling. The silence that followed was electric. Elena could see Sterling weighing his options, could practically hear the gears turning in his head as he calculated his next move. Behind her, she heard Patricia's sharp intake of breath, Vivian's confused murmur, Madison's excited whisper. There must be some mistake, Sterling said, but his hand was still hovering near his jacket. Yes, Sarah agreed, her voice steady and calm. There certainly is. That's when Elena realized Sarah Chen wasn't just a wedding photographer. The way she held herself, the quick assessment of the room's exits, the casual confidence in her voice. These weren't the mannerisms of someone who spent her days capturing happy couples. Elena, Sarah said softly, not taking her eyes off Sterling. I think it might be time for you to tell everyone what's really going on. Elena looked around the room, at her confused family, at the false insurance investigator whose cover had just been blown, at the photographer who clearly wasn't what she seemed. The carefully constructed plans she'd made were crumbling around her, but maybe that wasn't entirely a bad thing. Maybe it was time to stop running from the truth. You're right, Elena said, her voice growing stronger. It is time. She turned to face her family. 3 months ago, I met Jonathan Ashworth. He wasn't just a fashion designer. He was investigating something bigger, something dangerous. And now he's dead because of what he discovered. What? Vivian's voice was barely a whisper. The dress I'm wearing isn't just worth $1 million because of its craftsmanship, Elena continued, the words tumbling out faster now. It's worth $1 million because of what Jonathan hid inside it. Evidence that could bring down some very powerful people. And they've been hunting for it ever since they killed him. Sterling's hand was fully inside his jacket now. Ms. Rosewood, I think you've said enough. Have I? Elena's fear was transforming into something sharper, more focused. Because I don't think you're here about insurance at all. I think you're here because your employers want what Jonathan hid, and they're willing to kill me to get it. Elena? Patricia breathed, her face white with shock. What are you saying? I'm saying, Elena replied, her eyes locked on Sterling, that my wedding day just became a lot more complicated. Sterling's gun cleared his jacket in one smooth motion, the black metal gleaming in the morning light streaming through the windows. Screams erupted from Elena's family as they scrambled for cover behind the furniture. You're absolutely right, Ms. Rosewood, Sterling said, his pleasant facade finally dropping completely. Things are about to get very complicated indeed. Time slowed to a crystalline crawl as Elena stared down the barrel of Sterling's gun. The weapon looked impossibly large in the elegantly appointed bridal suite, a brutal intrusion of violence into a space designed for joy and celebration. Nobody move, Sterling commanded, his voice now stripped of all pretense. Ms. Rosewood, you're going to take off that dress. Slowly. And then you're going to tell me exactly what Jonathan Ashworth hid inside it. I don't know what you're talking about, Elena lied, even as her mind raced through her limited options. The balcony was behind her, but 23 floors was a long way to fall. The bathroom had no windows, no escape route. Yes, you do. Sterling's finger rested lightly on the trigger, a detail that made Elena's stomach lurch. This man had done this before. He was comfortable with the weight of a gun in his hand. Ashworth was clever, I'll give him that. He suspected we were closing in, so he hid his evidence in the last place anyone would think to look, embedded in the construction of a wedding dress. Behind the overturned chaise lounge, Patricia was sobbing quietly. Vivian held Madison protectively, both of them pale with terror. But Sarah Chen was moving. The photographer had dropped low the moment Sterling drew his weapon, but instead of cowering like Elena's family, she was positioning herself with the careful precision of someone trained for combat. Elena caught a glimpse of movement, saw Sarah's hand slip inside her camera bag. The thing is, Sterling continued, apparently oblivious to Sarah's movements, we know the evidence exists. Ashworth was thorough. Bank records, photographs, recorded conversations, everything we need to destroy several very important people. But he was also paranoid. He didn't trust digital storage, didn't trust banks or lawyers or any of the usual hiding places. So you killed him, Elena said, trying to keep Sterling's attention focused on her. That was regrettable, Sterling admitted. We tried to acquire the information through other means, but Jonathan proved uncooperative. The old man actually thought he could expose us, bring down an organization that's operated successfully for decades. He was naive. Elena felt a surge of anger at the casual dismissal of Jonathan's life. The designer had been kind, passionate, brilliant, a man who dedicated his life to creating beauty. He deserved better than dying for the crime of having a conscience. What organization? Elena asked, genuinely curious now. What was Jonathan going to expose? Sterling smiled, the expression sharp and predatory. Let's just say that certain international shipping routes require flexibility in their documentation. The Ashworth family has been very helpful over the years in ensuring that flexibility. The Ashworth family. Elena's heart sank as the implications hit her. Marcus, she whispered. Your fiancé is a good man, Ms. Rosewood. Honest, ethical, completely unaware that his family's shipping empire has been facilitating some very profitable illegal activities. Jonathan Ashworth discovered the connection 6 months ago, distant cousins, but close enough to share a name and certain shipping contracts. Elena felt the ground shifting beneath her feet. Marcus was innocent, but his family's business was dirty. Jonathan had discovered the connection and been killed for it. And now Elena was wearing the evidence that could expose it all. The dress, she said, understanding flooding through her. The dress, Sterling confirmed. Microscopic threads, woven with data storage capabilities. Financial records, shipping manifests, photographs of cargo that should never have been transported. All of it embedded in a garment so beautiful that no one would ever think to question it. You're insane, Vivian called out from behind her makeshift barricade. This is Elena's wedding day. She's marrying Marcus Blackstone in 3 hours. Actually, Sterling said, checking his watch, the wedding has been cancelled. Ms. Rosewood won't be walking down any aisles today. That's when Sarah Chen made her move. Elena saw it happen as if the world had shifted into slow motion, Sarah rising from behind her equipment bag, something metallic gleaming in her hand, the photographer's body moving with fluid grace as she brought her own weapon to bear. Drop it, Sarah shouted, her voice carrying the unmistakable authority of law enforcement. Federal agent, weapon down now. Sterling spun toward the new threat, his gun swinging away from Elena for the first time since he'd drawn it. Elena threw herself sideways, crashing into the vanity and sending makeup and champagne glasses flying. The first gunshot was deafeningly loud in the enclosed space. Elena hit the floor hard, silk bunching around her legs as she crawled frantically toward the bathroom. Behind her, she could hear her family screaming and could hear Sarah shouting commands. A second shot rang out, followed by the sound of shattering glass. Elena risked a glance over her shoulder and saw that one of the floor-to-ceiling windows had spiderwebbed, struck by a stray bullet. "Elena!" Vivian's voice cut through the chaos. "Elena, are you hurt?" "Stay down," Elena called back, pressing herself against the bathroom doorframe. She could see Sarah and Sterling locked in a deadly dance, both seeking cover while trying to maintain clear lines of fire. "Your FBI?" Sterling snarled, diving behind the bed as Sarah's next shot splintered the headboard. "Something like that," Sarah replied grimly. "We've been tracking your organization for 2 years. Jonathan Ashworth was our informant." Elena's world tilted again. Jonathan had been working with the FBI? That explained his paranoia, his insistence on secrecy, his urgency in the weeks before his death. "Your informant is dead," Sterling pointed out, popping up to fire another shot that went wide. "But his evidence isn't," Sarah replied. "And thanks to Elena, we finally know where it is." Elena looked down at her dress. Her beautiful, simple, deadly wedding dress. Somewhere in its construction, woven into the very fabric, were the secrets that could bring down a criminal organization. Jonathan had turned her into a walking treasure chest, and she'd never even known it. Another gunshot echoed through the room, followed by Sterling's grunt of pain. Sarah had winged him, Elena realized. But wounded didn't mean defeated. "The window!" Sterling shouted suddenly, and Elena realized he wasn't talking to himself. The spider-webbed glass exploded inward, as 2 black-clad figures repelled through the opening, automatic weapons in their hands. Elena screamed as bullets began flying in earnest, the elegant bridal suite transforming into a war zone. Sarah dove for cover behind the overturned furniture, returning fire with professional precision. But she was outnumbered now, 3 against 1 in a room full of civilians. "Elena!" Sarah shouted over the gunfire. "The bathroom! Get to the bathroom and lock the door!" Elena didn't need to be told twice. She scrambled across the floor, silk tearing as she moved, and threw herself into the bathroom, just as bullets began punching holes in the wall where she'd been crouching. She slammed the door and turned the lock, then pressed her back against the marble wall and tried to think. Her phone was still in the main room, along with everything else she might use to call for help. The bathroom had no windows, no other exits. She was trapped, but she was also alive, which was more than she might be able to say in a few minutes. "Lan!" The gunfire outside was intensifying. Elena could hear furniture being overturned, could hear her mother's terrified sobs, could hear Sarah shouting tactical commands that suggested she was anything but a simple photographer. Elena looked at herself in the bathroom mirror and saw a bride in a $1 million dress that contained enough evidence to topple a criminal empire. Her makeup was smeared, her hair had come loose from its elegant updo, and there was a wild look in her eyes that she barely recognized. She also saw something else in the mirror, a small ventilation grate near the ceiling, just large enough for a person to crawl through if they were desperate enough. And Elena was definitely desperate enough. She climbed onto the marble vanity, her heels slipping on the smooth surface as she reached for the grate. Her fingers found the screws holding it in place, and she began working them loose with the back of an earring. The gunfire outside reached a crescendo, then suddenly stopped. In the silence that followed, Elena could hear footsteps approaching the bathroom door. "Ms. Rosewood," Sterling's voice called out, slightly breathless now. "I know you're in there. This can still end peacefully. All we want is the dress." Elena didn't answer. She was too busy working on the final screw, her hands shaking with adrenaline and fear. "Your family is safe," Sterling continued. "The photographer, well, she chose her side. But your mother, your sister, your cousin, they don't have to be part of this. Open the door, give us what we came for, and they can go home." The screw came loose in Elena's fingers. She carefully removed the grate and peered into the ventilation shaft beyond. It was dark, cramped, but it appeared to lead away from the bathroom toward other parts of the hotel. "Elena, please," Vivian's voice joined Sterling's, thick with tears. "Just do what he says. It's just a dress. Just a dress." If only it were that simple. Elena gathered up the silk skirts as best she could and began climbing into the ventilation shaft. The space was tight, barely wide enough for her shoulders, and the dress made everything more difficult. But she was small, and fear gave her strength she didn't know she possessed. Behind her, she heard Sterling's patience finally snap. "Break down the door," he commanded. The first impact shook the entire bathroom. Elena scrambled forward through the shaft, her hands and knees scraping against metal as she pulled herself deeper into the building's infrastructure. The dress snagged on every corner, every junction, but she kept moving. The bathroom door exploded inward, just as Elena reached a junction in the ventilation system. She could go left toward what she hoped were other hotel rooms, or right toward what sounded like mechanical equipment. She chose left, pulling herself along as quickly and quietly as she could manage. Behind her, she could hear Sterling's frustrated curses echoing through the shaft she'd just vacated. "Find her," he snarled. "She can't have gone far in that dress." Elena kept crawling, the silk bunched around her waist, her carefully styled hair catching on every protrusion. Her hands were already torn and bleeding from the rough metal edges, but she didn't dare stop. Stop. Somewhere ahead of her, she could see light filtering through another grate. She crawled toward it with desperate determination, hoping it would lead to safety, to help, to somewhere she could finally catch her breath and figure out what to do next. What she found instead was another hotel room, and she wasn't alone. A woman in a hotel uniform was standing at the window, her back to the ventilation grate. Elena could see that the woman was speaking quietly into a radio, her voice too low to make out the words. Elena held her breath, trying to decide whether to risk revealing herself. The woman could be hotel security, could be helped, or she could be another member of Sterling's organization, stationed here to watch for exactly this kind of escape attempt. The woman turned around, and Elena's heart sank. She recognized the face. It was the same woman who had delivered the package that morning, the one containing Jonathan's final message. The woman who had signed the delivery receipt as J. The woman who was now smiling up at the ventilation grate with cold, predatory satisfaction. "Hello, Elena," she said softly. "I've been waiting for you." The tension is building. If you're enjoying this story, hit that like button and let me know in the comments which character you're rooting for. Your support helps me create more incredible stories like this one. Elena's blood turned to ice as she stared down at the woman in the hotel uniform. The cramped ventilation shaft suddenly felt like a coffin, metal walls pressing in from all sides as the reality of her situation hit her with devastating clarity. "You're not hotel staff," Elena whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of the building's air circulation system. "Very good," the woman replied, her smile sharp as broken glass. "Though I am impressed you made it this far. Most people would have given up by now, handed over the dress and hoped for mercy." Elena's mind raced as she tried to process this new betrayal. The woman who had delivered Jonathan's package this morning had signed as J. Had Elena walked into a trap from the very beginning? "You sent me the warning text," Elena said, pieces clicking into place. "You told me to trust no one." Excellent advice, don't you think? The woman's voice carried a slight accent that Elena couldn't place. "Though I notice you didn't follow it very well. You trusted Jonathan Ashworth. You trusted the FBI agent masquerading as your photographer. And now, here you are, trusting that a ventilation shaft would lead to safety." Elena's hands were cramping from gripping the metal edges of the shaft, but she didn't dare move. Below her, the woman, who was she, stood with casual confidence, as if she had all the time in the world. "What do you want?" Elena asked, though she already knew the answer. "The same thing everyone wants today. The dress, the evidence, the power to control what happens next." The woman moved closer to the grate, her eyes never leaving Elena's face. "But unlike the others, I'm not here to kill you for it." "Then what?" "I'm here to make you an offer." Elena almost laughed. "An offer? You've been manipulating me since this morning. You delivered a package that made me think Jonathan was still alive, still trying to help me." "Jonathan is dead," the woman interrupted, her voice suddenly sharp. "But his message was real. He recorded it 3 days before his death, along with instructions on how to find you if something happened to him." The ventilation shaft seemed to grow smaller around Elena as she processed this information. "You knew Jonathan. I worked with Jonathan. We were partners, you might say, though not in the way you're thinking. The woman reached into her jacket and pulled out a small device. A tablet, Elena realized. He was trying to expose the Meridian Syndicate. I was trying to infiltrate it. The Meridian Syndicate? The organization Sterling works for. They've been using legitimate shipping companies as fronts for decades, moving everything from weapons to drugs to human trafficking victims. The Blackstone family business was just their latest acquisition. Elena felt sick. Marcus, her sweet, honest Marcus, had no idea his family's empire was built on such horrors. Jonathan discovered the connection 6 months ago, the woman continued. He was going to take everything to the FBI, but he needed proof. So he started documenting everything, collecting evidence, building a case. And you were helping him? I was using him, the woman said bluntly. My name is Dr. Katerina Volkov, and I work for a very different kind of organization. One that's been tracking the Meridian Syndicate for years, waiting for the right moment to strike. Elena's grip on the metal shaft was slipping. Her hands were slick with sweat and blood, and the awkward position was becoming impossible to maintain. What kind of organization? The kind that doesn't officially exist, Katerina replied. The kind that operates in the spaces between governments, cleaning up messes that are too big or too dangerous for conventional law enforcement. You're a spy. Among other things. Katerina checked her tablet, frowning at whatever she saw there. But right now, I'm the only person standing between you and a very unpleasant death. Sterling's people have secured the hotel floor. The FBI agent, Sarah Chen, is dead. Your family is being held hostage. Elena's world tilted. Sarah was dead? The woman who had tried to save her, who had fought 3 armed men to protect her family? I don't believe you, Elena whispered. Katerina held up her tablet, showing Elena a live feed from the bridal suite. Elena could see her mother and sister huddled in the corner, their faces streaked with tears. Madison was unconscious, a bruise darkening her temple. And there, in the center of the room, lay Sarah Chen in a pool of blood. She fought well, Katerina said softly, but she was outnumbered. Elena felt tears burning her eyes. Sarah had died trying to protect her, and Elena didn't even know her real name. The offer, Elena said through gritted teeth. What's your offer? Help me get close to the syndicate's leadership. They're all here, in this hotel, for your wedding. Marcus's family, the shipping executives, the offshore financial managers. Everyone who matters in the Meridian organization is gathered in one place for the social event of the season. And you want to do what, exactly? Kill them all? Nothing so dramatic, Katerina smiled. I want to download their entire network. Financial records, communication logs, operational details, everything we need to dismantle the syndicate from the inside. Elena stared down at the woman, trying to process what she was hearing. And in exchange? In exchange, I get you and your family out of here alive. Your mother, your sister, your cousin, they go home safely. You get to disappear, start a new life somewhere the syndicate can't find you. What about Marcus? Katerina's expression softened slightly. Marcus is a good man caught in a bad situation. If he's truly innocent, he'll survive what's coming. If he's not, she shrugged. Elena closed her eyes, fighting back despair. Everything she'd believed about her life, about her future, about the man she was supposed to marry in less than 3 hours, was crumbling around her. How do I know you're telling the truth? She asked. How do I know you're not just another member of the syndicate trying to trick me? You don't, Katerina admitted. But consider your alternatives. You can stay in that ventilation shaft until Sterling's people figure out how to get you out. And then you can watch them torture your family until you give them what they want. Or you can trust me. Elena looked at the tablet screen again, at her family's terrified faces. Patricia was trying to comfort Madison, who was starting to regain consciousness. Vivian was staring at the bathroom door, probably wondering if Elena was already dead. If I help you, Elena said slowly, what happens to the evidence Jonathan collected? The proof of what the syndicate has been doing? It gets used to destroying them, Katerina said firmly. Every trafficking victim they've moved, every weapon they've shipped, every life they've destroyed, it all ends. Elena made her decision. How do I get down from here? Katerina smiled, and for the first time, the expression seemed genuine. Very carefully, that dress is worth more than most people's lives, and we're going to need every thread of it intact. 20 minutes later, Elena stood in the hotel room wearing a housekeeping uniform that was 3 sizes too big for her, her wedding dress carefully folded in a maintenance bag. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and her face was clean of makeup. She looked like just another member of the hotel staff. The plan is simple, Katerina explained, as she applied theatrical makeup to Elena's face, adding lines and shadows that aged her by at least 15 years. The syndicate leadership is gathering in the hotel's penthouse conference room. They're planning to conclude some business before the wedding ceremony, assuming there still is one. What kind of business? The kind that involves moving $50 million worth of illegal cargo through Blackstone shipping routes in the next 6 months. Katerina finished with the makeup and stepped back to examine her work. Perfect. Your own mother wouldn't recognize you. Elena looked at herself in the bathroom mirror and had to agree. The woman staring back at her looked tired, weathered, invisible, exactly the kind of person the wealthy elite never really noticed. I go in as housekeeping, Elena said, understanding the plan. Plant whatever surveillance equipment you need, get out clean. Exactly. The dress stays here, safe and hidden, until we can extract you and your family. Elena nodded, but something was bothering her. Katerina, how did you know I would come through the ventilation system to this exact room? Katerina paused in her equipment check. What do you mean? I mean, there are dozens of rooms on this floor. Dozens of possible routes through the building's infrastructure. But you were waiting in exactly the right place at exactly the right time. The silence stretched between them, heavy with implications. Katerina's hands had gone very still. That's a very good question, Elena, she said finally. I think it's time for a very good answer. Katerina turned to face her, and Elena saw something in the woman's eyes that made her stomach clench with renewed fear. The truth is, Katerina said softly, this room isn't random. It's directly above the penthouse conference room. The ventilation system here connects to the building's central air handling system, which means what? Which means the syndicate has been using this room to monitor their own meetings for months. They've been recording everything, building their own insurance policy against betrayal. Elena felt the ground shifting beneath her feet again. And you knew this. I knew this. Which means you're not here to destroy the syndicate. You're here to take control of it. Katerina's smile was cold and sharp as winter. Elena, my dear, you're much smarter than anyone gave you credit for. Yes, I'm here to take control. The Meridian Syndicate is too profitable to simply destroy. But it needs better management, cleaner operations, more sophisticated methods. Elena backed toward the door, but Katerina was already moving, her hands slipping inside her jacket to reveal the outline of a weapon. Don't make this harder than it needs to be, Katerina warned. You're going to help me whether you want to or not. The only question is whether your family lives through the process. Elena's hand found the door handle, but it didn't turn. Locked from the outside, she realized. She'd been trapped from the moment she'd climbed down from the ventilation shaft. You played me, Elena whispered. I played everyone, Katerina corrected. Sterling thinks he's working for the syndicate's current leadership. The FBI thinks they have an asset in place. Your fiancé thinks he's marrying a simple, innocent girl. And you thought you were the victim in all of this. I am the victim. No, Elena, you're the weapon. That dress contains more than evidence about the syndicate's operations. It contains the financial codes, the communication protocols, the operational details needed to control the entire network. Jonathan didn't just hide evidence in that dress. He hid the keys to the kingdom. Elena stared at Katerina, understanding flooding through her like ice water. Jonathan wasn't trying to destroy the syndicate. He was trying to steal it. And now, thanks to you, I'm going to finish what he started. The door behind Elena opened suddenly, and she spun around to find Sterling standing in the hallway, his gun drawn and a fresh bandage on his shoulder where Sarah had wounded him. "Dr. Volkov," he said, his voice carrying a note of grudging respect, "I should have known you were involved." "Mr. Sterling," Katerina replied calmly, "I trust you've secured the hotel." "The bride's family is contained. The FBI agent is dead. The building is locked down." Sterling's eyes never left Elena's face. "But I'm afraid there's been a complication." "What kind of complication?" "The kind that involves Marcus Blackstone," Sterling said grimly. "He's not the innocent fool we thought he was. He knows about the syndicate. He's known for months." Elena felt the world tilt one final time. Marcus, her beloved Marcus, wasn't innocent at all. "In fact," Sterling continued, "he's been working with the FBI to bring down his own family's business. The wedding, the dress, Ms. Rosewood herself, it's all been part of an elaborate sting operation." Katerina's composure cracked for the first time. "That's impossible." "Is it?" Sterling smiled coldly. "Because Marcus Blackstone is currently in the penthouse conference room with 3 FBI tactical teams, and they're all waiting for Elena to walk through the door wearing that dress." Elena's legs gave out. She sank to the hotel room floor, her mind reeling as she tried to process what she was hearing. Marcus was FBI? Their entire relationship had been a lie? "So you see," Sterling continued, "we have a problem. The dress contains evidence that could destroy the syndicate, but taking it to the penthouse means walking into a federal trap. And Ms. Rosewood here is the only person who can get us out of this mess." "How?" Elena asked weakly. Sterling's smile widened. "You're going to call your fiancé, and you're going to tell him exactly what he wants to hear. You're going to lead the FBI into a trap of their own." Elena looked between Sterling and Katerina, seeing the cold calculation in both their eyes. They were going to use her to destroy the people trying to save her, and then they were going to kill her anyway. Mapaure, unless she could find a way to turn the tables on all of them. "All right," Elena said, forcing strength into her voice. "I'll make the call. But first, I want to see my family. I want to know they're safe." Sterling and Katerina exchanged glances. "That can be arranged," Katerina said finally. "But Elena, if you try anything clever, if you try to warn the FBI or double-cross us in any way, your mother and sister will pay the price." Elena nodded, her mind already working on a plan. She was tired of being everyone's pawn, tired of being manipulated and lied to and used. It was time to take control of her own story. "I understand," she said. "Let's go see my family." What they didn't know was that Elena had been listening very carefully to everything they'd said. And she'd noticed something important, something that might just save all their lives. Katerina had mentioned the building's central air handling system. Sterling had talked about the penthouse conference room, and Marcus, sweet, honest Marcus, who apparently wasn't honest at all, was waiting upstairs with the FBI. Elena had spent 3 months preparing for this day, planning for every contingency she could imagine. She'd studied the hotel's layout, memorized the security protocols, even practiced escape routes. What she hadn't planned for was the possibility that everyone was lying to her, including herself. But now, as she followed Sterling and Katerina through the hotel's service corridors, Elena began to formulate a plan that would either save everyone she cared about or get them all killed in the process. She was betting everything on the hope that Marcus still loved her, that some part of their relationship had been real. She was also betting on the one thing no one had accounted for, that a simple wedding dress could be more powerful than any weapon in the right hands. The service elevator was a tomb of polished steel and lies. Elena stood between Sterling and Katerina, her hands steady despite the chaos in her mind. The hotel uniform felt like a costume now, another layer of deception in a day that had become an endless series of betrayals. "Floor 19, Sterling said, pressing the button. "Your family is in the executive conference room. We've made them comfortable." Elena said nothing, but her mind was cataloging details. The elevator's emergency phone, the service panel, the fact that Katerina kept checking her watch with increasing frequency. Whatever was happening in the penthouse, it was happening on a schedule. The elevator dinged softly as it reached the 19th floor. The doors opened to reveal a hallway that looked like a corporate office. Beige carpet, motivational art, the kind of space where million-dollar deals were made and broken with equal indifference. "This way," Katerina said, leading them down the corridor. Elena could hear voices behind one of the doors. Her mother's voice, tight with fear, and Vivian's higher pitch answering. They were alive. That was something. Sterling opened the door to reveal a conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Patricia, Vivian, and Madison sat at a polished mahogany table, their hands zip-tied behind their chairs. Two armed men in black tactical gear stood guard by the windows. "Elena!" Patricia's voice broke on her daughter's name. "Oh, thank God, we thought. I'm here, Mom." Elena moved toward them, but Sterling's hand on her arm stopped her. "Close enough," he said. "You can see they're safe. That's what you wanted." Elena studied her family's faces. Patricia looked exhausted, her careful makeup streaked with tears. Vivian's eyes were red-rimmed but alert. She was watching everything, Elena realized, storing details the way she always did. Madison was pale but conscious, a butterfly bandage covering the cut on her temple. "Are you hurt?" Elena asked. "No," Vivian said quickly. "Scared, but not hurt." "Elena, what's going on? Who are these people? Why did they kill that photographer?" Elena's throat tightened. Sarah Chen, whoever she really was, had died trying to protect them. That had to count for something. "It's complicated," Elena said, the words feeling hollow. "Complicated doesn't cover it," Katerina interrupted. "Time to make that phone call, Elena. Marcus is waiting." Sterling handed Elena a cell phone. "You're going to tell him you escaped from the room, that you're safe but scared. You're going to ask him to meet you somewhere private, somewhere away from the FBI teams. And then we eliminate some problems," Sterling said simply. Elena looked at the phone, then at her family, then at the two people who held all their lives in their hands. She thought about Marcus, about the man she'd thought she was going to marry, about the possibility that their entire relationship had been built on lies. She also thought about Jonathan Ashworth, who had died trying to do the right thing. About Sarah Chen, who had died trying to protect her. About all the victims of the Meridian Syndicate who had died nameless and forgotten in shipping containers and dark alleys around the world. "Before I make this call," Elena said, "I want to know something." "What?" Katerina asked impatiently. "I want to know who you really are. Not the story about being a spy or working for some shadow organization. The truth." Katerina's expression didn't change, but Elena caught something in her eyes, a flicker of something that might have been respected. "The truth is rarely as interesting as the lie," Katerina said. "Try me." "Very well." Katerina moved to the window, looking out at the city spread below them. "My name is Katerina Volkov, and I am exactly what I told you, a spy. But not for any government. I work for a private organization that specializes in acquiring and redistributing illegal assets." "You're a thief," Elena said. "I'm a very expensive thief. My clients pay me to steal from other criminals. Weapons, drugs, money, information. I take from those who have no legal recourse and redistribute to those who pay me well for the service. And the Meridian Syndicate is my next target. They've been operating for 30 years, moving everything from human trafficking to weapons smuggling through legitimate shipping channels. They're worth approximately $2 billion in liquid assets, and my clients would like to acquire those assets." Elena felt sick. "You're not here to destroy them. You're here to rob them. I'm here to transfer their wealth to people who will use it more constructively. My current clients are very interested in funding certain humanitarian efforts. With stolen money. With money stolen from thieves and murderers. It's remarkably easy to justify." Sterling was growing impatient. "Fascinating as this is, we need to move. The FBI won't wait forever, and neither will Marcus." Elena looked at the phone again. "What happens to my family after I make this call?" "That depends on how cooperative you are," Sterling said. Play your part well, and they go home with an interesting story to tell. Cause problems and… He didn't need to finish the threat. Elena took the phone and dialed Marcus's number. It rang twice before his familiar voice answered. Elena? Jesus, I've been worried sick. Are you okay? The hotel security called and said there was an incident. I'm okay, Elena said, surprised by how steady her voice sounded. I'm safe. But Marcus, something's wrong. Something's very wrong. Where are you? I can come get you. Elena looked at Sterling, who nodded encouragingly. I'm on the 19th floor, in one of the conference rooms. But Marcus, I don't know who to trust anymore. There are people here who aren't who they say they are. Elena, listen to me very carefully. I need you to stay exactly where you are. Don't move, don't talk to anyone, don't trust anyone. I'm coming to get you right now. Marcus, wait. But the line had gone dead. Sterling smiled with satisfaction. Perfect. He'll be here in 5 minutes, probably with minimal backup since he thinks he's rescuing his frightened bride. We'll be ready for him. Elena handed the phone back, her mind racing. Something about the conversation had felt wrong, but she couldn't put her finger on what. You're making a mistake, she said. Am I? Sterling checked his weapon, chambering around. I don't think so. Marcus Blackstone is about to walk into a trap, and once he's eliminated, the FBI will lose their inside man. We'll have a clear path to the syndicate's leadership. And then Dr. Volkov and I will have a conversation about profit sharing. Katerina turned from the window, her expression amused. Will we indeed? The syndicate's assets are too valuable to simply steal, Katerina. They need to be managed, developed, and expanded. I propose a partnership. How romantic, Katerina said dryly, but I'm afraid I work alone. Elena watched the two criminals circle each other like sharks, their polite facade finally cracking. In the chairs, her family sat silent and terrified, but Elena noticed that Vivian was working at her restraints, her fingers moving with careful persistence. The door opened, and Marcus stepped into the room. Elena's heart nearly stopped. He looked exactly like the man she'd fallen in love with. Tall, broad-shouldered, with kind eyes and a gentle smile. But now she was seeing him through the lens of everything she'd learned, and she couldn't help but wonder how much of that kindness was real. Elena, he said, relief flooding his voice. Thank God you're safe. Hello, Marcus, Sterling said, his gun suddenly visible. So good of you to join us. Marcus's eyes swept the room, taking in the armed men, the bound prisoners. The weapons pointed in his direction. His expression didn't change, but Elena saw something shift in his posture, a subtle readiness that suggested he was far from helpless. I assume you're Sterling, Marcus said calmly. We've been looking forward to meeting you. Have you? Sterling's confidence wavered slightly. And who exactly is we? The 23 federal agents currently surrounding this building, for starters. The tactical teams positioned on every floor. The snipers on the surrounding rooftops. Marcus smiled, and Elena saw steel beneath the kindness. Did you really think we'd let you operate in our city without watching every move? Katerina cursed in what sounded like Russian. You said the FBI didn't know about this location. The FBI didn't, Sterling replied grimly. But apparently Marcus Blackstone is more resourceful than we gave him credit for. Actually, Marcus said, I'm exactly what you thought I was. A man in love with a woman who got caught up in something bigger than herself. His eyes found Elena's across the room. The question is, what are you willing to do to get her back? Elena stared at him, confusion and hope warring in her chest. Marcus, I don't understand. I know about Jonathan Ashworth, Marcus said, never taking his eyes off her. I know about the dress, about the evidence, about everything. But what I don't know is whether you're here because you want to be, or because you're being forced. The room fell silent. Elena could hear her own heartbeat, could feel the weight of everyone's attention focused on her. This was the moment, the choice that would determine not just her fate, but the fate of everyone in the room. I'm here, she said finally, because I want to understand the truth. About the syndicate, about Jonathan, about you. The truth about me is simple, Marcus replied. I've been working with the FBI for 8 months to bring down my family's business. Not because I don't love them, but because I love them too much to let them continue being part of something that destroys lives. And the truth about us? Marcus's voice softened. The truth about us is that I fell in love with you the moment I saw you in that coffee shop. Everything else, the FBI, the investigation, the timing, all of that was just circumstance. My feelings for you were never part of the plan. Elena felt tears burning her eyes. She wanted to believe him, wanted to believe that some part of their relationship had been real. But trust was a luxury she could no longer afford. The dress, she said. Do you know what's really hidden in it? Marcus nodded. Financial records, shipping manifests, communication logs. Everything needed to trace the syndicate's operations back to their source. And the location of 53 shipping containers full of trafficking victims currently en route to ports around the world. Elena's blood went cold. Trafficking victims? Women and children, Marcus said grimly. The syndicate's most profitable cargo. The containers are scheduled to arrive at their destinations over the next 72 hours. Without the information in that dress, we'll never find them in time. Elena looked at Sterling and Katerina, seeing new disgust in their faces. They weren't just criminals. They were complicit in slavery. Where is the dress? Marcus asked. Safe, Elena said. But not here. Sterling's gun swung toward Patricia. Then I suggest you make it here very quickly. Don't, Marcus said sharply. Harm her family and you'll have bigger problems than the FBI to worry about. Will I? Sterling's finger tightened on the trigger. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're outnumbered and outgunned. That's when the lights went out. Emergency lighting kicked in a second later, bathing the room in red. In the confusion, Elena heard movement, shouts, the sound of breaking glass. Someone was screaming. Madison, she thought. And chairs were being overturned. When the lights came back on 30 seconds later, the situation had changed dramatically. Marcus had one of the guards in a chokehold, the man's weapon now in Marcus's hands. Sterling was pressed against the wall, Katerina's gun pointed at his head. And Elena's family was free, their restraints cut, huddled together by the door. Vivian? Elena called out. I'm okay, her sister replied, holding up a small knife. Took me 20 minutes to cut through those restraints. I've been waiting for the right moment. Elena stared at her sister with new respect. Where did you get a knife? Purse? Vivian said simply. Never leave home without it. The standoff stretched for several seconds before Marcus spoke. Here's what's going to happen, he said calmly. Elena is going to get the dress. We're going to decode the information it contains. We're going to save those people in the shipping containers. And then we're going to destroy the Meridian Syndicate once and for all. And if we refuse, Sterling asked, then you'll spend the rest of your lives in federal prison, assuming you survive the next 5 minutes. Elena looked around the room at the tableau of violence and betrayal, at the family she loved and the man she'd thought she was going to marry, at the criminals who had used her, and the evidence that could save dozens of lives. I'll get the dress, she said, on one condition. What condition? Marcus asked. I want the truth. All of it. No more lies, no more secrets, no more half-truths. If we're going to save those people, if we're going to end this, I need to know exactly what I'm walking into. Marcus met her eyes across the room. Elena, some truths are dangerous. More dangerous than this? She gestured at the chaos around them. More dangerous than people dying in shipping containers? More dangerous than living the rest of my life looking over my shoulder? Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded. You're right. You deserve the truth. All of it. Then let's go get the dress, Elena said. And let's finish what Jonathan started. As they prepared to leave the conference room, Elena caught sight of herself in the reflective surface of the window. She looked like a stranger, hair pulled back, makeup smeared, wearing a too large hotel uniform. She certainly didn't look like a bride, but maybe that was appropriate. After today, she wasn't going to be the same woman who had put on that $1 million wedding dress this morning. She was going to be someone stronger, someone who had chosen her own path instead of letting others choose for her. She was going to be someone who could live with the truth, no matter how dangerous it might be. The question was whether any of them would survive long enough to see it through. The journey back to the hotel room where Elena had hidden the dress felt like a funeral procession. Marcus led the way, Sterling's confiscated weapon in his hand, while Katerina followed with Elena's family. Sterling himself walked with his hands zip-tied behind his back, his earlier confidence replaced by grim resignation. "The elevator's compromised," Marcus said as they reached the service corridor. "We'll take the stairs." 23 floors? Patricia asked weakly. "In these heels?" "Mom, I think heels are the least of our problems right now," Vivian replied, but her voice was gentle. As they climbed, Elena found herself walking beside Marcus, the man she'd thought she was going to marry in. She checked her watch. 2 hours. "When did you know?" she asked quietly. "About the syndicate, about your family's involvement." Marcus was quiet for several steps. 8 months ago, I found some shipping manifests in my father's office. Cargo weights that didn't match the bills of lading, destinations that weren't on any official records. I started digging, thinking maybe it was just creative accounting. But it wasn't. It wasn't. His voice carried the weight of disappointment, of dreams destroyed. My family's business, everything I'd been raised to inherit, was built on human misery. And the worst part was, I don't think my father even knew. He trusted the wrong people, signed the wrong contracts, and they slowly took over everything. They reached the 20th floor landing, and Marcus paused to check the corridor beyond the door. "Clear," he said. "Keep moving. When did you contact the FBI?" Elena asked as they continued climbing. 6 months ago. Agent Chen, Sarah, was my handler. She was supposed to protect you if things went wrong." Elena felt a fresh stab of grief. "She died trying to save my family." "She died doing her job," Marcus corrected gently. "Sarah knew the risks, we all did." Elena stopped walking. "We all did." "Marcus, what aren't you telling me?" Behind them, Sterling laughed bitterly. "Oh, this is rich. You still don't know, do you?" "Know what?" Elena demanded. Marcus's expression was painful. "Elena, maybe we should discuss this after." "No." Elena's voice cut through the stairwell like a blade. "I'm tired of being the last to know everything. I'm tired of being manipulated and lied to and treated like a child. Tell me what Sterling thinks is so funny." Marcus looked at her for a long moment, then sighed. "You weren't randomly chosen, Elena. Jonathan Ashworth didn't meet you by accident in that coffee shop." Elena felt the blood drain from her face. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying," Sterling called out from behind them, "that you were recruited, darling, carefully selected and positioned to play exactly the role you've been playing." "That's not true," Elena whispered, but even as she said it, she could feel the horrible logic of it settling into place. "Jonathan Ashworth was working with the FBI," Marcus continued reluctantly. "But he needed someone to carry his evidence. Someone who could get close to the syndicate's leadership without arousing suspicion. Someone who was about to marry into the Blackstone family." Elena sank onto the stairs, her legs suddenly unable to support her weight. "You're saying that Jonathan, that you, that everyone—" "No," Marcus said firmly, sitting beside her. "Elena, my feelings for you are real. They were never part of the plan. I fell in love with you despite the investigation, not because of it. But you used me. I protected you. There's a difference." Elena looked up at him, studying his face in the harsh, fluorescent light of the stairwell. "Is there? Because from where I'm sitting, it feels like everyone in my life has been lying to me for months." "Not everyone," Vivian said softly. "Your family loves you, Elena. Whatever else happens, that's real." Elena felt tears threatening again, but she forced them back. She couldn't afford to break down now, not when so many lives depended on what happened next. "The dress," she said, standing up with renewed determination. "Let's get the dress and finish this." They climbed the remaining floors in silence. When they reached the 23rd floor, Marcus checked the corridor carefully before leading them toward the room where Elena had hidden the wedding dress. "How many agents are in the building?" Katerina asked as they walked. "Enough," Marcus replied without turning around. "That's not an answer. It's the only answer you're getting." They reached the door, and Elena used the keycard Katerina had given her. The room looked exactly as they'd left it. Anonymous hotel furniture, drawn curtains, the maintenance bag containing her wedding dress lying on the bed like a sleeping secret. Elena picked up the bag with hands that were steadier than she felt. The dress seemed heavier now, weighted with the knowledge of what it contained. "Before we do this," she said, turning to face the group, "I need to know something else." "What now?" Sterling asked impatiently. "I need to know what happens after. Let's say we decode the information, save the trafficking victims, and bring down the syndicate. What happened to me? What happens to my family? What happens to us?" She looked directly at Marcus as she said the last part. Marcus's expression was carefully neutral. "The FBI will relocate you if necessary. New identities, new lives, witness protection if the threat level warrants it." "That's not what I'm asking, and you know it." The room fell silent. Elena could hear the distant sounds of the city through the windows, could feel the weight of everyone's attention focused on her. "I'm asking if there's an us to worry about," Elena continued. "I'm asking if the man I fell in love with actually exists, or if he was just another lie constructed to make me more cooperative." Marcus set down his weapon and moved closer to her. "Elena, everything I've told you about my feelings is true, but I can't pretend that the situation isn't complicated. We've both been through something that changes people, and we won't know who we really are until this is over. So that's a no. That's an I don't know, which is the most honest answer I can give you." Elena nodded, surprised by how much the honesty hurt. But it was better than another lie. "All right," she said. "Let's see what Jonathan left for us." She unzipped the maintenance bag and carefully removed the wedding dress. Even wrinkled and transported in a hotel laundry bag, it was still beautiful, deceptively simple, elegantly constructed, worth a fortune in both craftsmanship and hidden secrets. "How do we access the information?" Elena asked. Marcus pulled out a small device that looked like a cross between a smartphone and a jewelry loop. "This is a microthread scanner. It can detect and decode the data woven into the fabric. And then we find out exactly what Jonathan Ashworth died trying to tell us." Marcus activated the device and began scanning the dress, starting with the bodice and working his way down. For several minutes, nothing happened. Then the device began beeping softly, its screen filling with streams of code. "Found it," Marcus said. "The data's embedded in the silk threads using a technique I've never seen before. It's like microscopic DNA encoding." "What does it say?" Katerina asked, moving closer. Marcus worked with the device for several more minutes, his expression growing increasingly grim. Finally, he looked up. "This is bigger than we thought. The syndicate isn't just trafficking people in drugs. They're moving weapons, stolen art, industrial secrets. They're essentially running a shadow shipping network that spans the globe." "How big?" Elena asked. $3 billion in annual revenue. Operations in 47 countries. At least 200 people are directly involved in the leadership structure." Sterling laughed bitterly. "And you thought you could bring all of that down with a wedding dress?" "Not just a wedding dress," Marcus replied. "Jonathan was thorough. He's got financial records going back 5 years, communication logs, operational details, even photographs of cargo that was supposed to be medical supplies but was actually military hardware." Elena stared at the dress in her hands. Such a beautiful thing, containing such ugly truths. "The trafficking victims," she said. "Where are they?" Marcus scrolled through the data on his device. 53 containers currently at sea. 17 bound for ports in the United States, 22 heading to Europe, 14 destined for Southeast Asia, all scheduled to arrive within the next 72 hours. "How many people?" Marcus's voice was barely a whisper. "Estimated 8 to 12 people per container, mostly women and children." Elena felt sick. Hundreds of people trapped in metal boxes, being shipped like cargo to lives of slavery and abuse. And she was holding the key to saving them. "What do we do?" she asked. "We get this information to the FBI immediately," Marcus said. "They can coordinate with international authorities to intercept the containers. And if we're too late?" "We won't be," Marcus said firmly. "We can't be." Katerina had been unusually quiet during the data review. Now she spoke up. "There's something else," she said. "Something none of you have considered." "What?" Elena asked. "The syndicate's leadership structure. According to this data, they're not just shipping cargo. They're shipping themselves." Marcus looked up from his device. "What do you mean?" "I mean the top tier of the organization doesn't stay in one place. They move constantly, using their own shipping network to transport themselves and their operations. They're essentially a floating criminal empire." Elena felt a chill run down her spine. "They're on one of the ships?" "According to this, yes. The Leadership Council is currently aboard a container ship called the Meridian Star, scheduled to dock in New York Harbor tomorrow morning." Marcus cursed under his breath. "That's why they wanted the dress so badly. They knew it contained information about their location." "And now we know where they are," Elena said slowly. "We could stop them." "We could," Marcus agreed. "But it would be dangerous. The ship is essentially a floating fortress, and they'll be expecting trouble after today." Sterling, who had been listening to the conversation with growing agitation, finally spoke up. "You're all missing the obvious solution," he said. "Which is?" Katerina asked. "Trade. Give them what they want in exchange for the trafficking victims." "That's not how justice works," Marcus replied firmly. "Justice?" Sterling laughed. "You think this is about justice? This is about survival. The syndicate has been operating for 30 years. You think one raid, one arrest, one seizure is going to stop them? They'll regroup, rebuild, and be back in business within 6 months." "So what are you suggesting?" Elena asked. "I'm suggesting you negotiate. Trade the dress and its information for the lives of those people in the containers. Everyone wins. The victims get saved, the syndicate gets to continue operating, and you get to walk away alive." The room fell silent as everyone processed Sterling's words. Elena could see the appeal of his suggestion. It was clean, simple, guaranteed to save the immediate victims. But it was also a surrender, an acceptance that some evils were too big to fight. "No," she said finally. "No?" Sterling seemed genuinely surprised. "No," Elena repeated more firmly. "Jonathan Ashworth died trying to stop these people. Sarah Chen died trying to protect my family. I'm not going to dishonor their sacrifice by making deals with murderers." "Elena," Patricia said softly, "maybe we should consider." "Mom, no." Elena turned to face her family. "I know you're scared. I know you want this to be over. But if we give up now, if we let them continue, how many more people will die? How many more families will be destroyed?" She looked around the room, meeting each person's eyes in turn. "Marcus, you said the trafficking containers arrive within 72 hours? "Yes." "And the leadership ship docks tomorrow morning?" "Yes." "Then we have a plan. We use the information in the dress to coordinate a simultaneous strike. Rescue the victims and capture the leadership at the same time." "Elena," Marcus said carefully, "that kind of operation would require extensive coordination between multiple agencies in multiple countries. The logistics alone." "Then we better get started," Elena interrupted, "because I'm not walking away from this, not when we have the power to end it." She looked down at the dress in her hands, her wedding dress, which was supposed to have been the symbol of her new life beginning. Instead, it had become something else entirely. A weapon, a responsibility, a choice between the easy path and the right one. "Besides," she added with a smile that surprised her with its steadiness, "I was never really the type for a traditional wedding anyway." That's when the windows exploded inward. Glass showered the room as black-clad figures repelled through the openings, automatic weapons trained on everyone inside. Elena threw herself to the floor, clutching the dress protectively as bullets began flying. "Nobody moves!" a voice shouted over the chaos. "FBI! Everyone on the ground!" But these weren't FBI agents, Elena realized as she looked up from behind the overturned chair where she'd taken cover. The tactical gear was wrong, the weapons were different, and the leader removing his helmet had the cold blue eyes of someone she'd seen before. David Sterling's brother, she realized with a sinking heart. The family resemblance was unmistakable. "Hello, Elena," the new Sterling said with a smile that was just as cold as his brother's. "I'm Thomas Sterling, and I'm here to collect what belongs to my employers." Elena looked around the room at her family cowering behind furniture, at Marcus reaching for his weapon, at Katerina calculating angles and escape routes. The wedding dress lay crumpled beneath her, its hidden secret suddenly feeling heavier than lead. "I'm getting really tired of people pointing guns at me," she said, surprising herself with how calm she sounded. Thomas Sterling's smile widened. "Then give me what I want, and the guns go away. And if I don't? Then this room becomes a crime scene, and we take the dress anyway." Elena looked at the dress, then at her family, then at Marcus. She thought about Jonathan Ashworth and Sarah Chen, and all the victims trapped in shipping containers around the world. She thought about the choice between safety and justice, between the easy path and the right one. "Counteroffer," she said, standing up slowly with the dress in her arms. "I give you the dress and you let my family go, but I'm coming with you." "Elena, no!" Marcus and Vivian said simultaneously. "Elena, yes," Thomas Sterling said with satisfaction. "I think we can work with that arrangement." Elena met Marcus's eyes across the room. "Get the information to the FBI, save those people. End this." "I'm not letting you sacrifice yourself," Marcus said firmly. "You're not letting me do anything," Elena replied. "This is my choice." She turned to Thomas Sterling. "Do we have a deal?" "We do," he said. "Though I should mention, you won't be coming back." Elena nodded, having expected as much. "I know." As the tactical team prepared to escort her from the room, Elena took one last look at her family, at the man she'd almost married, at the life she was leaving behind. "Tell them I chose this," she said softly. "Tell them it wasn't their fault." And then she walked out of the room, carrying a $1 million wedding dress and the power to save hundreds of lives, heading toward an uncertain fate with a courage that surprised even her. The last thing she heard before the door closed was Vivian's voice, strong and clear. "We love you, Elena. We'll find you. Whatever happens, we'll find you." Elena smiled as she walked toward the elevator, surrounded by armed men and carrying the weight of the world in silk and secrets. She believed her sister. And for now, that was enough. The helicopter ride to the harbor was a study in controlled terror. Elena sat between two armed guards, the wedding dress in a protective case on her lap, watching the city lights blur past beneath them. Thomas Sterling sat across from her, studying her with the same cold calculation his brother had shown. "You're calmer than I expected," he said over the rotor noise. "I'm terrified," Elena replied honestly. "But I'm tired of being afraid. Fear keeps people alive. Fear also keeps people from living." Thomas smiled, and Elena saw something almost like respect in his expression. "You're not what we expected, Ms. Rosewood." "What did you expect?" "A pampered socialite who would break under pressure. Someone we could manipulate easily." Elena looked down at the case containing her wedding dress. "I was that person this morning. I'm not anymore." The helicopter began to descend, and Elena could see the harbor spread out below them. Massive container ships floated like steel islands in the dark water, their cargo holds filled with mysteries and nightmares. "The Meridian Star," Thomas said, following her gaze. "Beautiful, isn't she?" Elena looked at the ship he indicated, a massive vessel that dwarfed the others around it. Even in the darkness, she could see that it was different from the other cargo ships. Sleeker, more modern, with modifications that suggested it was much more than a simple transport vessel. "How many people are on board?" she asked. "Enough," Thomas replied. "The ship is essentially a floating headquarters, executive quarters, conference facilities, communications center, even a small prison for difficult guests." Elena's blood chilled. "Like me. Like you." The helicopter touched down on the ship's deck with military precision. Elena was immediately surrounded by more guards, professional soldiers who moved with the fluid coordination of a well-trained unit. "Welcome aboard the Meridian Star," Thomas said as they walked across the deck. "Your home for the foreseeable future." Elena looked around as they moved through the ship's corridors. From the outside, it looked like a cargo vessel, but the interior was more like a luxury hotel, combined with a military command center. Rich carpeting, expensive art, state-of-the-art technology, all of it serving to disguise the ship's true purpose. Impressive, she said. The syndicate believes in comfortable working conditions, Thomas replied. Happy employees are productive employees. They passed through several security checkpoints, each more sophisticated than the last. Biometric scanners, metal detectors, armed guards who nodded respectfully to Thomas but studied Elena with professional suspicion. Finally, they reached a set of ornate, double doors. Thomas knocked twice, paused, then knocked 3 more times in a specific rhythm. "Enter," a voice called from within. The doors opened to reveal a conference room that belonged in a Fortune 500 boardroom, not on a cargo ship. A long mahogany table dominated the space, surrounded by leather chairs and expensive fixtures. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the harbor. Seated around the table were 8 men and women in expensive suits, all of whom turned to study Elena as she entered. At the head of the table sat an elderly man with silver hair and piercing green eyes who radiated authority. "Ms. Rosewood," he said, his voice carrying a slight accent she couldn't identify. "I am Victor Meridian, and these are my associates. Welcome to our little floating kingdom." Elena forced herself to meet his gaze steadily. "Mr. Meridian, I assume you're the one in charge of this operation." "I prefer to think of myself as a facilitator. The syndicate is a cooperative effort. A cooperative effort that traffics human beings." Meridian's expression didn't change. "Among other things. Please sit. We have much to discuss." Elena remained standing. "Before we discuss anything, I want proof that the people in those shipping containers are safe." "Ah yes, the trafficking victims. You're concerned about their welfare. I'm concerned about their lives." Meridian gestured to one of his associates, a woman with short black hair and cold eyes. She operated a tablet, and a large screen descended from the ceiling. The image that appeared made Elena's stomach lurch. It was a cargo container, but the interior had been modified with basic life support systems. Dozens of people, women, children, some men, sat huddled in the cramped space, their faces hollow with fear and exhaustion. "Container number 47B," Meridian said casually. "Currently aboard the cargo ship Northern Promise, approximately 6 hours from the port of Los Angeles. As you can see, the occupants are alive and relatively well." Elena stared at the screen, seeing faces that would haunt her forever. A young woman holding a child who couldn't be more than 5 years old. An elderly man trying to comfort a teenager. Dozens of human beings were reduced to cargo. "How many containers like this are there?" she asked. 53 currently in transit, Meridian replied. "Representing our most profitable quarterly shipment in 5 years." Elena felt rage building in her chest, but she forced it down. Anger wouldn't help those people. Only the information in her wedding dress could do that. "You want the evidence Jonathan Ashworth collected," she said. "We want the evidence destroyed," Meridian corrected, "along with anyone who has seen it. That would include me." "Unfortunately, yes." Elena looked around the room at the faces of the syndicate leadership. They were discussing her death with the same casual indifference they might use to discuss quarterly profit margins. "But," Meridian continued, "you've proven to be more resourceful than anticipated. Perhaps there's a way to make this arrangement mutually beneficial." "I'm listening." "The evidence in that dress could certainly damage our operations. But it could also be used to eliminate our competitors. There are rival organizations who would pay handsomely for information about our methods and routes." Elena stared at him. "You want to use Jonathan's evidence to start a war between criminal organizations. I want to use it to consolidate power. The trafficking market is fragmented, inefficient. Too many small operators working without proper coordination. The information you carry could help us streamline the industry." The casual way he discussed human trafficking as an industry made Elena feel physically ill, but she forced herself to maintain her composure. "And in exchange?" "In exchange, you live. Comfortably, I might add. The syndicate takes good care of its assets." "Assets?" "You would be invaluable as a liaison to law enforcement. Someone with intimate knowledge of FBI methods, someone who could help us stay ahead of future investigations. Elena looked at the screen showing the container full of victims, then back at Meridian's expectant face. "I need time to think about it," she said. "Of course. Thomas will show you to your quarters. But don't take too long. We dock in New York Harbor in 8 hours, and certain decisions need to be made before then." As Thomas led her from the conference room, Elena's mind was racing. She needed to find a way to communicate with Marcus and the FBI, needed to let them know the ship's location and the situation with the containers. But she was surrounded by professional criminals on a floating fortress in the middle of the harbor. Her quarters turned out to be a luxurious stateroom with a king-sized bed, expensive furnishings, and a porthole that offered a view of the harbor lights. It was a beautiful prison cell. "The dress stays with me," Elena said as Thomas prepared to leave. "Of course. Though you should know that attempting to destroy it would be inadvisable. We have ways of recovering data even from damaged fabric." After he left, Elena sat on the bed and carefully removed the wedding dress from its case. In the soft lighting of the stateroom, it looked almost ethereal, a masterpiece of design and craftsmanship that happened to contain the power to save hundreds of lives. She thought about Jonathan Ashworth, who had died trying to do the right thing. About Sarah Chen, who had sacrificed herself to protect others. About Marcus, who was probably coordinating with the FBI right now to mount some kind of rescue operation. Elena looked around the stateroom, noting the security cameras in the corners, the lack of communication devices, the solid construction that would make escape virtually impossible. But as she studied her surroundings more carefully, she noticed something interesting. The porthole wasn't just decorative, it actually opened. And while the stateroom was several decks above the waterline, Elena could see that there were maintenance ladders and emergency equipment positioned at regular intervals along the ship's hull. She also noticed that her wedding dress, when held up to the light, revealed patterns in the fabric that weren't visible under normal circumstances. Jonathan had been even more clever than anyone realized. The data wasn't just embedded in the threads, it was woven into the very structure of the dress in a way that created a visual pattern when illuminated properly. Elena moved to the porthole and held the dress up against the glass, using the harbor lights as a backlight. Slowly, a pattern emerged, not just random data, but coordinates, dates, and what looked like a detailed schematic of some kind. Her heart raced as she realized what she was looking at. Jonathan hadn't just hidden evidence in the dress, he'd hidden a complete blueprint of the Syndicate's operations, including the layout of the Meridian Star itself. The dress was showing her the ship's security systems, the location of the communications center, even what appeared to be emergency protocols. Jonathan had somehow obtained the vessel's complete technical specifications and encoded them into her wedding dress. Elena studied the pattern more carefully, memorizing every detail. If she was going to find a way off this ship, if she was going to help the FBI save those trafficking victims, she needed to understand exactly what she was dealing with. A soft knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Elena quickly folded the dress and placed it back in its case. "Come in," she called. Thomas Sterling entered, carrying a tray of food. "Thought you might be hungry. It's going to be a long night." "Thank you," Elena said, though she had no appetite. Thomas set the tray on a small table and turned to leave, then paused. "For what it's worth, Ms. Rosewood, I hope you make the smart choice." "Which choice is that?" "The one that keeps you alive." After he left, Elena sat at the table and picked at the food while her mind worked through possibilities. She needed to contact Marcus, needed to find a way to transmit the information about the ship's location and the trafficking containers. But she was trapped on a floating fortress with no communication devices and no apparent way to escape. Unless… Elena looked at the wedding dress again, thinking about Jonathan's ingenuity. If he had embedded technical specifications for the ship in the fabric, maybe he had included other information as well. Communication frequencies, security codes, emergency protocols. She spent the next hour carefully examining every inch of the dress under different lighting conditions, looking for hidden patterns and embedded information. What she found exceeded her wildest expectations. Jonathan Ashworth hadn't just been a fashion designer and FBI informant. He had been a master spy, and this dress was his masterpiece. Embedded in its construction were not just financial records and shipping manifests, but complete intelligence files on the syndicate's operations, detailed technical specifications for their equipment, and even communication protocols for law enforcement agencies in 12 countries. The dress was more than evidence. It was a complete intelligence package designed to bring down the entire criminal network. Elena smiled for the first time since boarding the ship. Jonathan had given her everything she needed to turn the tables on her captors. Now she just had to figure out how to use it without getting killed in the process. As she began planning her next move, Elena heard the sound of helicopter rotors approaching the ship. She moved to the porthole and looked out to see another aircraft landing on the deck, this one carrying what appeared to be additional security personnel. The syndicate was taking no chances. They knew the FBI would be looking for her, and they were preparing for a fight. Elena touched the wedding dress gently, feeling the weight of its hidden secrets. "Thank you, Jonathan," she whispered. "Now let's finish what you started." Elena's plan began at 3:17 a.m., when the ship's night watch was at its minimal staffing. She had spent hours memorizing the technical specifications hidden in her wedding dress, learning the layout of the Meridian Star's communications center, security systems, and emergency protocols. The dress itself had become her roadmap to salvation. Working by the faint harbor lights coming through her porthole, Elena carefully separated several threads from the dress's hem. Threads that, according to the pattern she'd decoded, contained specific frequency codes for emergency maritime communications. Jonathan had been thorough beyond belief, embedding not just evidence but actual operational tools within the fabric. Using a hairpin and the metal frame of her bed, Elena constructed a crude but functional radio transmitter. It was primitive, barely powerful enough to reach beyond the ship's hull, but it would have to be enough. At 3:30 a.m., she began transmitting on the emergency frequency used by the Coast Guard. "Mayday, Mayday, this is Elena Rosewood, aboard the cargo vessel Meridian Star, coordinates." She rattled off the position data she'd memorized from the dress pattern. "I repeat, this is Elena Rosewood. The vessel is controlled by human trafficking organization. Request immediate assistance." She transmitted the message 3 times, then quickly dismantled her improvised radio and hid the components. If anyone had been monitoring her room's audio, she hoped they would assume any electronic noise was just interference from the ship's systems. Now came the hard part, waiting to see if anyone had heard her call for help. Elena didn't have to wait long. At 4:15 a.m., she heard increased activity in the corridors outside her stateroom, footsteps moving faster, voices speaking in urgent tones. Something had changed aboard the Meridian Star. At 4:30 a.m., Thomas Sterling burst through her door without knocking. "Get dressed," he commanded. "We're moving." "Moving where?" "The mainland. There's been a complication." Elena's heart leaped. Her Mayday call had been received, but she kept her expression neutral as she gathered her belongings. "What kind of complication?" "The kind that requires us to accelerate our timeline." Thomas watched her carefully as she placed the wedding dress back in its protective case. "You'll be interested to know that your fiancé has been quite busy tonight." Elena's pulse quickened. "What do you mean?" "FBI raids on 17 different syndicate facilities, coordinated strikes on shipping operations in 4 countries, and approximately 200 arrests in the past 6 hours. Thomas's voice was tight with controlled anger. "Someone has been very generous with information." Elena forced herself to look confused. "I don't understand. How could that happen so quickly?" "Someone leaked the information from your dress before you left the hotel. Someone made copies." Elena's mind raced. Marcus must have found a way to duplicate the data during their brief time together. While she'd been focused on the immediate crisis, he'd been planning ahead, preparing for exactly this scenario. "But I have the original," Elena said, gesturing to the case. "Yes, you do, which makes you the only person who can verify which of the leaked information is accurate and which is deliberate misinformation." Elena stared at him. "You're saying the FBI raids might be hitting the wrong targets? I'm saying we need to find out, and you're going to help us." 20 minutes later, Elena found herself in the ship's communications center, a sophisticated command post that looked like something from a spy movie. Multiple screens showed news feeds from around the world, tracking the coordinated law enforcement actions that were dismantling the syndicate's operations in real time. Victor Meridian stood at the center of it all, his earlier calm replaced by cold fury. "Ms. Rosewood," he said without turning around, "I hope you can explain how the FBI obtained detailed intelligence about our operations before you even left the hotel." Elena looked at the screens, seeing news reports of raids and arrests, ships being boarded, warehouses being searched, criminals being led away in handcuffs. It was happening. The syndicate was being taken down. "I can't," she said honestly. "I didn't know anyone else had access to the information." "But you suspected." Elena met his eyes. "I hoped." Meridian's smile was sharp as a knife. "Honest, at least. That's refreshing." He turned to address the room. "Ladies and gentlemen, it appears our carefully constructed organization is under assault. The good news is that we anticipated this possibility. The better news is that we have contingency plans." A new screen descended from the ceiling, showing a detailed map of the eastern seaboard. Red dots marked locations along the coast, with timer displays counting down beside each one. "What am I looking at?" Elena asked, though she was afraid she already knew. "Insurance," Meridian replied. "The shipping containers with our human cargo weren't just heading to port facilities, Ms. Rosewood. They were heading to secure locations where they could be liquidated if the situation required it." Elena's blood turned to ice. "You're going to kill them." "I'm going to protect my investment. Those people represent significant value to my organization. If we can't deliver them to their intended buyers, they become a liability." Elena stared at the countdown timers. The longest one showed just over 3 hours. "Unless," Meridian continued, "you help us identify which of the FBI raids are targeting legitimate operations and which are hitting decoy facilities." "How would I know that?" "Because the information in your dress contains real intelligence. You're going to help us decode it completely, and then we're going to use it to stay ahead of law enforcement while we implement our contingency plans." Elena looked around the communications center, seeing faces that regarded human life as nothing more than a balance sheet entry. These people were going to murder hundreds of innocent victims rather than let them be rescued. "And if I refuse?" "Then the contingency plans proceed immediately," Meridian said. 537 people will die in the next hour, and their blood will be on your hands." Elena felt the weight of the decision crushing down on her. Help the syndicate escape justice, or let hundreds of innocent people die. "Show me the dress," she said quietly. Thomas produced the case and opened it, revealing the wedding dress in all its deceptive simplicity. Under the communications center's bright lights, Elena could see patterns in the fabric that hadn't been visible before, data streams and code sequences woven into the very structure of the garment. She also saw something else, something that made her heart race with sudden hope. Hidden within the pattern was what appeared to be a countdown sequence of its own. Jonathan had embedded a self-destruct mechanism in the data, designed to activate if certain conditions were met. And according to the pattern Elena was reading, those conditions had been triggered by the FBI raids that were currently taking place around the world. The dress was going to destroy its own contents in approximately 90 minutes. Elena kept her expression neutral as she studied the fabric, pretending to decode financial information while actually watching the self-destruct sequence countdown. Jonathan had planned for this contingency too. If the syndicate tried to use his evidence against its intended purpose, the data would erase itself. "Well?" Meridian asked impatiently. "It's complex," Elena said, buying time. "The encoding is more sophisticated than I realized. I need more time to understand it fully. Time we don't have." "Then you'll have to choose accurate information or fast information. You can't have both." Meridian studied her for a long moment, then nodded to one of his associates. "Begin the contingency protocols. We'll proceed with what we have." Elena watched in horror as the screens began showing new activity. Ships changing course, containers being prepared for disposal, human beings whose lives were measured in countdown timers. That's when the first explosion echoed across the harbor. Every head in the communications center turned toward the windows, where they could see flashes of light illuminating the water in the distance. Emergency sirens began wailing from multiple directions. "What the hell?" Thomas began. Coast Guard, one of the technicians reported, his voice tight with alarm. Multiple vessels closing on our position. And sir, they're jamming our communications. Elena smiled for the first time since boarding the ship. Her makeshift Mayday call had been received after all. Battle stations, Meridian commanded. Prepare for emergency departure. The ship lurched suddenly as its engines roared to life. Through the windows, Elena could see Coast Guard vessels approaching with searchlights blazing, helicopters circling overhead with spotlights cutting through the darkness. But she could also see something else. Other ships in the harbor beginning to move. Cargo vessels that had looked innocent but were now revealing their true nature as syndicate operations. The Meridian Star wasn't alone, and the Coast Guard was facing a much larger threat than they'd anticipated. "You called them," Meridian said, his voice deadly quiet. "I called for help," Elena replied, "and it's coming." "Not soon enough." Meridian gestured to the screens showing the countdown timers. "Even if they stop us, even if they arrest every person in this room, those containers will still be destroyed. The kill switches are automated, triggered by any attempt to board or inspect the cargo." Elena stared at the timers, watching hundreds of lives tick away in digital displays. The Coast Guard rescue she'd hoped for was about to become a mass murder, unless she could find a way to stop it. Elena looked at her wedding dress one more time, seeing the self-destruct sequence still counting down. In 67 minutes, all the evidence Jonathan had collected would be gone forever. But the data was also connected to the Syndicate's operational systems, including the contingency protocols that threatened the trafficking victims. If the dress destroyed its own contents, would it also disable the kill switches? There was only one way to find out. "I need to examine the dress more closely," Elena said. "To decode the operational frequencies you need." Meridian hesitated, then nodded. "Do it, but quickly." Elena lifted the dress from its case, holding it up to the communications center's bright lights. The hidden patterns blazed to life, data streams flowing through the fabric like liquid light. She could see the self-destruct sequence accelerating, triggered by the external threat to the ship. "What are you doing?" Thomas demanded as Elena began pulling at specific threads. "Accessing the deep encoding," Elena lied, her fingers working frantically to activate the sequence Jonathan had hidden in the dress's construction. "The kill switch codes are in here, but they're protected by..." The dress suddenly flared with brilliant light as the self-destruct sequence reached its climax. Every screen in the communications center flickered and went dark. Emergency lighting kicked in, bathing everything in red. "What did you do?" Meridian roared. "I saved them," Elena said, as alarms began blaring throughout the ship. All of them. Through the chaos, Elena could hear new sounds. The roar of helicopter rotors, the crack of gunfire, the distinctive thump of flashbang grenades. The Coast Guard wasn't just surrounding the ship, they were boarding it. "FBI? Everyone on the ground." The voice echoed through the ship's PA system, and Elena recognized it immediately. Marcus. He'd come for her after all. The next few minutes passed in a blur of tactical teams, zip-tie restraints, and syndicate members being led away in handcuffs. Elena found herself sitting in the communications center, still holding her wedding dress, now just a beautiful but ordinary garment, its hidden secrets consumed by Jonathan's final safeguard. "Elena!" Marcus burst through the door, his FBI vest making him look like a stranger until she saw his eyes. The relief and love there were unmistakable. "The containers," she said urgently. "The trafficking victims." "Safe," Marcus assured her, pulling her into his arms. All 53 containers were intercepted. 537 people were rescued alive. The kill switches never activated. Elena sagged against him, the weight of the day finally catching up with her. Her wedding dress had saved hundreds of lives and brought down a criminal empire worth billions of dollars. "So," she said weakly, "I guess the wedding's off?" Marcus laughed, the sound slightly hysterical. "Actually, I was thinking we could reschedule, maybe somewhere with better security." "And fewer guns?" "Definitely fewer guns." As FBI agents led the syndicate leadership away in handcuffs, Elena looked at her wedding dress one last time. It was still beautiful, still perfectly crafted, still worth a fortune in artistry and skill. But now it was also something more. It was proof that sometimes the most powerful weapons come disguised as the most innocent things. You know, she said to Marcus as they watched the sunrise over New York Harbor, I think I might frame this dress instead of wearing it. Good idea, Marcus replied. Though I have to ask, are you sure you want to marry someone whose family business just got shut down by the FBI? Elena smiled, feeling truly happy for the first time in months. Marcus, after everything we've been through, I think a little unemployment is the least of our problems. 6 months later, Elena Rosewood became Elena Blackstone, in a simple ceremony at a small church in Vermont. She wore a different dress, beautiful but blissfully ordinary, with no hidden secrets or embedded data. The original wedding dress now hangs in the FBI's museum, labeled as Evidence Item 2024 to 7291, the Meridian dress. Visitors often comment on its deceptive simplicity, never suspecting that they're looking at one of the most sophisticated pieces of intelligence equipment ever created. Victor Meridian and his associates received life sentences without parole. The syndicate's assets were seized and used to fund victim rehabilitation programs worldwide. Thomas Sterling disappeared during transport to federal prison and was never found, though Elena sometimes wonders if she sees his cold blue eyes in crowds. And sometimes, late at night, Elena dreams about Jonathan Ashworth and Sarah Chen, and she whispers a quiet thank you to the heroes who gave their lives so that others might live. The wedding dress had indeed changed everything, just not in the way anyone expected. What did you think of this thrilling journey? Share your favorite moment in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss our latest tales. What kind of story would you like to hear next? Let us know in the comments. Your ideas help inspire our next incredible adventure.